Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. We're kind of all over the place today. Today we're going to talk about the end of the American war in Afghanistan, and it's crazy if you've followed along for this long on how it turns out. We're also going to completely change gears and talk about social media and the impacts it has had on the world society. And then, shifting gears again, you can't have world history if you don't mention COVID-19. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so you might be thinking, we talked about the war in Afghanistan already, didn't we? We did when it started, and that was when we were talking about terrorism and 9/11 and America invading Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban, who was in cahoots with Al-Qaeda and basically allowed Osama bin Laden to do his terrorist network from Afghanistan. And they're, oh, okay. Wait, didn't you just say we went in and blew everything up? We did. Cool, so we won, right? No. So this map that we talked about quite a bit yesterday is the Arab Spring protests in the Arab world. A lot of countries here really had uprisings by their people in pro-democracy terms. There's a very important area here that is not highlighted in red, and that is Afghanistan, which is over here to the right of Iran. So the reason that is because in 2011, while all these other countries are having these uprisings and protesting and overthrowing their democratic or overthrowing their dictator governments to put in a democracy, Afghanistan is going in the other direction. Because America had blown up Afghanistan and completely annihilated the very poor country it already was, and then had gone into Iraq and was doing Iraq, and then ISIS comes out in Iraq, and everybody's worried about that. Everybody had forgotten about Afghanistan. So if you live in Afghanistan and you're just a normal person in Afghanistan, you're not associated with terrorism or anything like that, you're a most likely poor farmer, whatever your job is in Afghanistan, all you know is that, yeah, the Taliban might be jerks or whatever, but whatever. Now, I should point out before, I don't know if I mentioned this, one of the big things with the Taliban being religious fundamentalists that they were, very strict on women. Women had almost zero rights in Afghanistan. So they were a repressive government. They weren't necessarily evil, depending on your viewpoint of it, but they were just a very stern, very fundamentalist group who had hostilities towards the West. So if you're just a normal person in Afghanistan, all you know is that America came in and completely blew everything up that you know. All right. If you had electricity, it's gone, running what? Like just everything got blown up. All right. You most likely have family members that were involved in the war. All right. That could have been killed. All right. Everybody lost something because this took place in their homeland. And then America shows up, blows everything up, and then leaves and runs to Iraq. You don't care about Iraq. You worry about the fact that everything you've known has been blown up. Nobody comes in to repair this. So while America is focused over in Iraq, you know who comes back to actually repair all this in Afghanistan? The Taliban. The same people that got ran out, the government that got run out, they come back because that is the government that the people in Afghanistan knew, and they say, hey, let's start rebuilding this. So the Taliban comes back, who, granted, probably wasn't very well liked by the people in Afghanistan overall, but they didn't show up and bomb everything and blow it all up. So the Taliban comes back and rebuilds Afghanistan and starts putting it back together because America was busy over in Iraq. Then, in 2011, once Afghanistan got put somewhat back together, the people were just like, you know what, we're cool with having, the Taliban around, I guess. And then America, apparently oblivious to this for half a decade, is like, oh my gosh, the Taliban's back. And America comes rushing back into Afghanistan to try to prevent the Taliban from taking place and taking control again. This makes for a really awkward situation because America comes too late. right? After the Taliban has already been there from day one trying to rebuild this thing that America blew up. Now the same country that blew it up is now back trying to tell you how you should run your government. All right? Oh, you need a democracy. You need a democracy. Well, why would the Afghanistan people, all right, who, keep in mind, they've already fought the Soviet Union and won them before, so they're not afraid of conflict. Why would they buy into the ideals of the country that bombed them? That's probably a big reason why the Arab Spring didn't take hold in Afghanistan, because the country that blew you up was the democracy. You're probably not a whole lot of pro-democracy, pro-person that blew you up their style government. So America comes back in and tries to force a democracy through in Afghanistan. They can go make a government in Afghanistan, right? They can find people that are like, yeah, we love America because America will support them. The problem is the democracy America kind of forces through in Afghanistan never really takes hold. There's a lot of people that just want America to leave. There's a lot of fighting. So America's not, these are troops on the ground here in Afghanistan. There's a lot of people in Afghanistan who are very angry at America and American troops, and fighting continues to take place in Afghanistan. There's a lot of American troops over there giving everything they have for their country. There's definitely, the troops that are doing the fighting aren't the ones making the political decisions. And I do think America has done a very good job as our culture of separating the sacrifices soldiers make in war around the world and the horrific atrocities they go through and the political ideals that sent them over there in the first place. So if you don't agree with the war in Iraq or Afghanistan, people still in America supported the troops, realizing they're just doing their job. They're not responsible for the poor handling of the entire situation. So Afghanistan doesn't quit. They're going to keep fighting. They did it with the Soviet Union. They're doing it with America. This lasts for a decade when America came back in. It is 2021. America has been here for 2 decades. Nothing's changing. You can't win the hearts and mind of the Afghanistan people when they don't trust the people that are trying to change their hearts and minds. So the Taliban, this group here, comes back into power. And America's like, okay, what are we going to do here? Are we going to escalate this war even further? No. America is called the U.S. Taliban deal. The United States makes a deal with the Taliban. The same people we went in to wipe out, is why we invaded Afghanistan, made a deal with them in order for America to leave and let the Taliban have Afghanistan. So America literally went in to get rid of the Taliban and is going to leave 20 years later, clearly having lost this war with the Taliban in charge. Very similar to Vietnam. America went into Vietnam to prevent it from becoming communist. There for a decade, leaves, and it becomes a communist country. America clearly lost in Vietnam. America clearly lost in Iraq with the growth of ISIS. Regardless of what Iraq turns into, that's not at the behest of American involvement. Afghanistan, clearly a loss. Why? Like, America is the most powerful military on earth. Why does America lose these wars like Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq? But then when it's like World War II, America shows up and drops bows and looks like a superhero. How can America lose to these poorer, weaker countries, but beat the really hard, difficult ones? How does that work? It's because we tend to view military engagements as equal across the board. It's not. America's really good at wars in which we are going to kick somebody out that's wearing a uniform. If country A gets invaded by country B, and country A is like, oh no, we're getting invaded. Hey, America, can you come and kick country B out of us? Absolutely, that is a clear goal. When America goes into, and America is understanding this, and this is a big reason why it goes back to, we signed the peace deal. America's starting to figure this out after 3 wars. You can't invade a country, blow them up, and then make them like you by shooting them. Absolutely. It's the same reason the pro-democracy groups are coming out in these other countries, because they don't like the hostile way they're being treated by their government. If we can't invade a country and aggressively force them to like you, like Afghanistan, like Iraq, like Vietnam, countries where we just need to go and get rid of a military and actual target and eliminate them, World War I, World War II, America is very good in that category, but we can't shoot people into liking us. And that is something that we have really learned from them. One of the most important things in this U.S. Taliban, you're like, wait a minute. If it's still like, so the terrorists that we went to kick out, we just let them have the country? No. All right. Let me play with the words there that I put in your mouth here. So the Taliban basically had a good connection with Al-Qaeda, all right, the terrorist network. One of the rules is the Taliban has to agree to have zero connection with terrorist organizations. If America finds out there's any terrorist group here, the deal is often America's invading again, blowing everything else up. All right, can't have any connection with terrorists. One of the things that the Taliban, and because they knew this was big to America, they have offered this. This only happened. This is being recorded in 2022. So this has only happened a year ago. So we will see how this all plays out. It could take a whole different turn, quickly, and all this whole lesson is obsolete. But the Taliban is the one, knowing America would expect to hear this, that they will allow more rights by more people in their country, namely women. They're not saying because in their fundamental view of society, men and women should have very different roles in society and therefore different rights. America generally prefers everybody to be treated equal in a democracy. The Taliban had promised that women will be treated more equal in society. I mean, I think the fact that the Taliban didn't they'll be treated exactly the same, because that would have been a complete lie and everybody would have seen through that. But the Taliban did say women will have more rights this time. The world has changed. We're going to do things a little differently this time. So while promising to treat more of their citizens equally in their society, while simultaneously agreeing not to have any connection with any terrorist group or allowed in their country, America leaves. And it's going to effectively end America's longest war. And Afghanistan is exactly the way. Hopefully the Taliban government is a different, mentality than it was 20 years ago. But America's going to leave Afghanistan, and nothing has really changed. So the question here is, explain in your own words using information learned in this course. And I talked about it pretty in depth here. Why was America not effective in Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, yet we're very effective in World War I and World War II? Explain why America struggles in some wars and then looks like a superhero in other wars. And I talked about that in depth there. So pause me, answer that completely, and we'll move on. All right. Social media, the advent of the internet. All right. I don't really need to tell you about the internet, because you're literally on the internet right now watching me, all right? And depending on how you're watching this lesson, I could be on social media right now as well. But social media has really taken the world by storm. The growth of population, of technology, to be able to connect with other people has really very quickly changed a lot of human behavior. So because I am old, by your standards, that I am a dinosaur when it comes to social media. Meaning, right, I am the same age as this guy. This is Mark Zuckerberg. This is the creator and founder of Facebook. He is worth $1 gazillion. We're the same age. He created Facebook when he was in college. There's literally movies about him creating this. And it was a cool idea. It was, you could connect to other people in colleges. And then as he got older, because I'm the same age as him, and he graduated college and I graduated college, all of a sudden Facebook stopped being just for colleges to connect with each other to, then it opens up to everybody, right? And I find it interesting as I move through my life and see the things that are important to me. Mark Zuckerberg, in his age, is going through the same phases. and opens up Facebook to more and more people. And then it gets to the point where it is so wildly successful. What do you allow on Facebook if you're held responsible for it? ISIS beheading videos? Do you allow that on Facebook? Oh, no, you got to take that off. Well, then is that censoring things? And there's a big question on how social media influences the media, how it influences society. And there's a big question on how much influence people like Mark Zuckerberg, right, has over media as a whole. And social media, now, there was a thing called, and this is a thing called MySpace. I remember that. Anyway, I'm really showing my age here. So there's tons of different social media ways to interact with each other. YouTube, Pinterest, and I'm really dating myself because, again, this is being recorded in 2022. You watch this in 2042, and you're going to be like, look at this old man talking about old people stuff. I'm cognizant of that, but this is what it is right now. So the question of how much do you censor stuff in social media is important, but I think the bigger question is, how does it impact individual people? Because when you can just say anything on the internet, now granted, we talked about censoring, you can't show beheading videos and stuff without those getting taken down, but there's no requirement to be truthful. And people like to present themselves on social media in the best possible light. And most people, you don't show your worst day on social media. You usually show your best day. So what is being presented on social media is basically an idealistic view of the world. But if you're scrolling through social media and you just see everybody's idealistic view of who they think they are constantly, especially if you're young, it's hard to discern what is reality and what is just make-believe. If all you ever see is everybody else is prettier than you because they have all these filters and all these other things, and oh my gosh, I don't look like that, but that is an extreme view of them. And because of that, we have seen very quickly on here, especially in the youth, of people comparing themselves, their body, their lifestyle, everything, to the people they see on the internet that may or may not be real. And if they are completely real, they're a one in a gazillion. People are like, I'm going to set $5,000 on fire because I'm so rich. You're like, oh, that's so awesome. Can't wait till I'm that rich. Even if that's not fake money that person's setting on fire outside, the chances of being rich enough to do that are almost non-existent. But since that's what gets interest on social media, it really distorts people's view about themselves, about how valuable they are, because they're only being presented with an extreme view or an idealistic view of life and society. On top of that, there is a concern that kids aren't interacting with their friends enough because they're buried into social media, video games, and video games being interactive on the internet is a is a concern. And because social media is still so new as far as the world goes, are kids missing out on the same experiences that little kids have had from the beginning of time because of social media, or is it increasing it? Or are they having more experiences because of it? And that data is still out, but it is concerning when you see the way children have grown up since the beginning of time, and since we still exist, obviously they grew up, that to see an entire generation grow up differently than any previous generation always gets people a little concerned on, is this going to be a good or a bad thing, or neutral? Now, before I throw too much salt here on social media and talk all the negatives about it, because people love to talk about negatives. So let's talk about some of the positives that social media has come out with. Because you can go online and give your view equal with everybody else, it does allow for an effective exchange of views. The amount of times I've gone on social media in my younger days and had an opinion on something that I was sure everybody else had the same opinion on, and then I realized, oh my gosh, most people don't view the same thing as me. And that was baffling to me. Why would they not think the same thing as me? And because of that, it's really helped me understand that there's so many different views that are equally as valuable as mine, and their opinions and morals and values are equally as important and valuable as mine. And I don't know if I lived 100 years ago if I would have ever experienced that. Because of social media, people are experience much higher exchange of views. They understand other people. Knowledge. Obviously, you have the internet. You can Google anything. Dating. I thought this was odd when I was doing research. So go ask your grandparents how they met. And it's probably either by luck, somebody just happened to know somebody and set them up, or they met them out, at a restaurant or something like that. It could have just been random. Could have been lucky. With the internet and people being more comfortable with it, you can, if you're trying to date somebody and find somebody that you want to marry or whatever, when you're older, I would assume. Anyway, questions on, do people do this in high school? I don't know. Anyway, to be able to have a criteria of what you're looking for, I think allows like-minded people that want to be in a relationship together to find each other. I also think tolerance to other sexualities, other religions, other anything that is different than whatever you are is heightened. I think being exposed due to social media to other people with different people allows a more accepting nature and the understanding that not everybody has to be like you. So social media, I do think, has benefits in that, but it is so new to the human society. I do think social media will make a lasting and profound impact on human existence moving forward. So the question here is, what have been some of the positive and negative impacts of social media in the modern world? So pause me, answer that completely, and we'll move on. All right, COVID-19. Nothing like trying to teach a history class about current events. So history is a lot of cause and effect, how people reacted to certain things. COVID-19, again, this is being recorded in 2022. The pandemic still exists at the time of this recording, so I cannot predict the future. All right. The time of this recording, it has now changed into 3 different variants. COVID, while it's getting easier transmissible, the viruses seem to get less deadly. There's vaccines, ways of protecting, but people still get it. Anyway. All right. So just kind of preference to preface this with the fact that I may not know what I'm talking about if you look or watch this in years to come, because I don't know what happens after what I'm recording right now. But COVID-19 actually stands for the coronavirus disease of 2019. So it originated in China, that we know. I'm not even going to go into too much details on that, because right now there's wild theories on multiple sides that seem logical to me, but because hopefully eventually we'll actually know where it came from and what the origins of it are, I'm not going to guesstimate right now. But it did sweep the world in the early part of 2020. It originated in 2019, kept the name even into 2020, 2021, now it's 2022. So it is so easily transmissible. And because we have such a large population, it is very difficult to get away from it. It is nearly impossible to get away from COVID-19. And society, as I'm teaching this, is having to find ways to adapt and deal with it in society. I wanted to look up how deadly this has been over time. And this is the amount of deaths by 100,000 people worldwide. It's millions of people have died worldwide from it. The United States here, and I really thought I would see more when I got to this graph, higher rates of death in more densely populated country. Yes, America is a very populated country, but it's not super densely populated. But the United States has the highest amount of deaths and infection rates than anywhere in the world. And that did surprise me a little bit. I mean, not wildly, but I mean, it originated in China, which is the same size as America, but they have 3 times as many people. They're not even on this list. India as well, same situation. They're not even on this list. And I was like, that just seems odd. Because every country listed here is a democracy, right? Not that India isn't a democracy, it's the world's largest democracy. But then I found this little figure, which kind of makes me realize I got to mention it because it's a world history course, but how accurate is this? Brazil, right? And this is back in 2020. This was 2 years ago from now. When the deaths in Brazil started to go up from COVID-19, they just stopped reporting it. They stopped counting deaths in COVID-19. I would imagine there's probably a logical reason for that. They're not just like being mean, like nobody can have information. You probably don't want people to panic. I mean, we can protect ourselves as much as possible. Adding a panic to a massive death toll probably, their logic is probably isn't beneficial. America clearly is like just basing on freedom of information and the Second Amendment, freedom of the press. That America, I don't think, is pulling any punches on the amount of deaths and sicknesses they have. But I do question if other countries might be, because if you can't get a pandemic under control, what does it say about your government? Especially if you're like a dictator country and you see stuff like the Arab Spring taking place where people are already trying to overthrow people in this era in human history. Talking about how many people keep dying and you can't do anything about it probably doesn't give them a lot of faith in your government moving forward. So while I tried to get some accurate numbers as of today of how many people have died, how many infections, it is really hard because it doesn't seem to be a collective agreement that, hey, let's be honest about our deaths and our infections because of the political consequences that could come from that. But the question here is, why is it hard to get an accurate worldwide numbers on the devastation that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused each country? And we just talked about that. So pause me. Answer that completely if you need to. It's the end. And that's what I got for you. See you guys next time.